from across the room. When our eyes met, I never knew that I could feel this way, and it's kinda strange. Don't even know your name. I don't know you, but I want to get to know you. Just wanna get to know you.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is all about bag storage. I've been getting a lot of questions around this topic, and I do always get these questions, but I guess they're coming in more often than usual because I am kind of sharing a new setup, still not quite done, but we're almost there. And so I thought I would try and answer some of your most frequently asked questions. They do all seem to revolve around the same kind of topic. So it's usually, aren't I afraid of sunlight, what I do about dust, and why I don't keep my bags in the dust bags, and just kind of general storage tips. So I'm going to be going through these by categories and hopefully kind of just talking about what I do, what I've learned along the way, and just answering some of your questions. So I hope you guys enjoy this, and let's get started. So the first topic, and by far the most frequently asked about one, is sunlight. Aren't I concerned about sunlight damaging my bags? And I've had a kind of few different closet setups over the years, but usually I do have a room with lots of light. In London, it was easier because a lot of the flats there do have very, very large windows. But even in this room where the windows are a little bit smaller, I still do have two of them, three if you include the bathroom, and this room does get a lot of light. But I'm not overly concerned because there are a few factors that play into whether your bags are going to get damaged by sunlight. The first thing is whether they are directly facing sunlight. So I probably wouldn't be that inclined to have my bags facing directly opposite the window as my shoes are. My shoes, I'm a bit less fussed because shoes generally aren't as expensive as bags, but even so, they are quite set back. So even though it looks like there is a lot of light happening, actually when you have a look and when you're in the room, they aren't kind of directly near the window and light, and that really does make a big difference. And I'm going to do a cutaway shot now to explain to you what I mean. I always do try to make sure that my bags are a little bit set back, which they are, and it's not much, but it does make a difference in terms of how affected by light your bags are going to be. I also wanted to say before I do the cutaway that the reason why I have those two panels on the door is because we're still waiting for the door, and we are about to order them. There was a bit of a hiccup in terms of the size and everything like that, but I didn't want, because I am switching to kind of this background, I didn't want a toilet in the way, which is what those panels are blocking. So I just got two panels and I did the best I could, which is why it's like that, but it won't be permanent. So as you can see, the shelving units are set back a little bit and the bags are a little bit in shadow. What's more important is that the bags aren't directly facing a window. I would never position bags like that, and kind of spanning around, you can see that my shoes are kind of facing the window, but they are on the other side of the room, so it doesn't bother me so much. Whereas the bags are kind of facing the other way. Yes, there is a window, but they aren't directly facing the window, and they are a little bit set back because that wall is not a particularly sunny day. This weather is kind of very standard for the UK, just a little bit gloomy, but you can see that the bags are mostly in shadow, so it really doesn't bother me. When it is really bright and sunny though, the light can get very streaky and it does hit the bags for a few hours, not all day because it depends where the sun positioning is, but when that is the case, then I do just go ahead and close the curtains, just so the bags are protected. This setup works fine though, and I've done something similar pretty much every time I've had bags in the past couple of flats. And so just being mindful of where the sun hits, having some sun protection if they are in kind of direct sunlight. But as long as my bags aren't directly facing a window, I try not to stress too much, and nothing's really ever happened to my bags. So as you can see, they're not quite in kind of glaring sunlight, as you might guess by the setup. They are a little bit set back, which really does make a difference. And of course, they aren't directly facing the window, which makes a huge amount of difference. For this reason, I would never ever store a bag on a windowsill because you're almost guaranteed to have it faded by the sunlight. So I'm always very careful. If you do ever see a bag on my windowsills, they are there for a few minutes, maybe an hour or two, but I am never going to be storing a bag or anything that I am particularly worried about fading on the windowsill, because you're almost guaranteed to have it dyed by the sun and have it gradually fade over time. One important thing to note as well, and this is absolutely not something I realized until we moved into, it was our first flat together actually, I didn't realize what a massive difference it makes where your windows and kind of general property is facing. Obviously this is a bit more pertinent in a flat, because in a house you're more likely to see every single angle, but even now it does make a difference which way the rooms face. And I believe our flat, I think it was like 2 flats ago, was east facing. I think that's right. And the streaky sun we would get was insane. I would wake up every single morning at like 7 a.m. because the sun beating in would be so hot and overwhelming, and it would stay like that until I'd say about like midday. It was not pleasant, and for this reason I'm convinced that you really need to be able to spend a night in a property before buying it, because it's just something we didn't realize because we'd never had that experience before. Our last flat was a lot more even because I think it was north facing, so it was much more even throughout the day and we didn't have that really streaky light. We do get that a little bit more here because I do believe my window is east facing, and for that reason I did pick window dressings accordingly. That does make a huge difference. If you have much more even light throughout the day, you're not going to have to worry as much, versus if you get very streaky light, that is something that you have to think about. That said, I'm still aware that we do get sunlight and we do get some sunny days, even if they're a bit rarer than I would like. And for that reason, I did pick curtains, which I don't know if I would have otherwise. You know, I was considering Roman blinds. I actually did a vlog where I was kind of debating what to go for. I ultimately decided on curtains, which is just a tried and tested method for me. This is the only room in the house where I do have curtains, but I do like the ease of being able to close them. Roman blinds, I had heard, were a little bit tricky to kind of open and close constantly, and I do close them all the time. I open them a lot, so they do get a lot of action, and that is something that I wanted to be able to protect my bag. So if I do see if it's a really sunny day, then I'll just go ahead and close the curtains, and that provides ample protection. So again, something to think about if you do want to store your bags in a room with a lot of light. Make sure that you do have good window dressings that you can easily open and close, just to have a bit of added protection if it is a really sunny day or if you do live in a sunny climate. Because of that, I have never had any damage happen to a bag because of the way I stored them. So, you know, I have been collecting bags for, gosh, probably longer than I'd want to remember. What is it, maybe 12, 13 years, maybe even a bit longer. I've never had any issues with any bags getting damaged in the way that I have stored them. What has happened though is a bag has gone damaged when I've taken it out and I haven't been aware of the sunlight. And this was a long time purchase, so I think, gosh, I think I bought it again maybe 12 years ago, something like that. It was a pre-loved one, and this was, I think it was back when I had like, you know, 2 Chanel bags, so it did get a lot of use. I remember when I first got it, this was like my daily bag. I used it every single day. I remember it being a very, very kind of sunny summer in London, and what I didn't even think about was the sun beating down on this bag. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to tell that at all, but on the flap there, you can see there is a very subtle faded effect, so it almost looks like an ombre effect when you lift up the flap. I was kind of horrified when I first saw it, and I don't mind it now because it's just a well-loved and used bag, but that is something to keep in mind. You know, that is kind of proof of the damage sun can have on your bags, and it's not something I would ever have considered that I would actually get damaged when I'm just out in the sun enjoying my bag, but I use it a lot. It was a really sunny summer and these things can happen. So definitely something to be aware of. You don't just have to think about how your bags are stored, you know, when you're not using them, but obviously you have to think about how much sun they're getting when you are using them. But it's not the end of the world, and I did learn a valuable lesson. So I have always been very aware of the effect of sunlight ever since then, and I have kind of adjusted my strategy accordingly, I guess. The second most frequently asked topic that I get asked about is dust. How do I deal with the dust that collects on shelves and on bags? I would say that in my experience of dealing with dust, not all rooms are created equal in terms of how much dust they attract. And I do think it depends on a whole variety of factors, including how, you know, where you live, how much dust is around the area, if you open your windows a lot, how much foot traffic as well the room gets. And so for that reason, I actually don't find that that this room gets very dusty at all, like very, very minimal dust. Whereas downstairs, our open plan living room, holy cow, it's like the dustiest room ever, and we are constantly having to dust it. So those two rooms we have found to be completely different, and obviously they're in the same house. So there are limited factors at play, but the biggest difference I think of is that downstairs we are much more likely to open the windows and obviously doors as well. And the room just gets a lot of foot traffic, you know, we're constantly in there throughout the day. Dan works in the living room, we relax there, we eat there, it's linked to the kitchen. So there is a lot of activity that happens there, and so it does get a lot of dust. In this room, I use it, but nowhere near the same. Dan hardly ever comes in here. It doesn't get a lot of foot traffic, you know, we don't walk through the room or anything like that. And because of that, there's just minimal dust. So again, that might be something that you think about. It depends on how many options you have for where you want to store your bags. But for me, it's not really an issue just because this room doesn't get that much foot traffic. For that reason, I don't have doors. I don't really feel like I need them. And my personal preference is that I just prefer wardrobes without doors because I don't know, I guess it kind of blocks the view of your bags a little bit, and I love to look at my bags. I think they're almost like art, so I love to display them. So for me, anything that kind of blocks the view of the bag, I'd rather not go near. So if I can avoid bags, I will, but that will come down to personal preference. You know, some people really like the look of doors and having that kind of cabinet effect. So personal preference, that's why I don't have doors. I just prefer it without them, and I do find that the dust isn't so crazy that I can't manage, so I would always just rather have shelving units without doors if I can. That said, obviously I still do have dust in my life. It's not as if this room is kind of like an air vacuum container or anything like that. This room, it does still have dust, and so when there is dust, I will just use a dust cloth and wipe it down. I don't use any chemicals, I don't use furniture polish or anything like that, because I'm always just a bit concerned that it's going to affect the leather or the finish of the bag. You never know what companies do to treat their bags, so I definitely don't want to have some kind of chemical mixture. So I just use a plain cloth, and I find that's more than adequate to cope with the dust. Not a big deal, it's just a quick wipe down anytime I feel like it does get a bit dusty. The next most frequently asked about topic that I get questions about are dust bags and how I use them, and whether I do actually store my bags like this or whether I pop them back in their dust bags after I kind of finish filming or taking photos. And the answer is my bags are always like this. I never store my bags in dust bags. That just sounds exhausting, and I'm very lazy to kind of constantly put them in and out of dust bags. So they are constantly like this. It's not just for YouTube or Instagram, and this is genuinely how I store my bags. The reason why I don't store my bags in dust bags is, one, I like the look of my bag, so I don't want to kind of have dust bags everywhere. I don't really like the look of just having lots of storage with lots of bags in dust bags. I just prefer to look at them and kind of have them as art. But the other reason is I genuinely think it is better to store them outside of dust bags. I know that people have varying opinions on this, but for me, I would always rather let my bags breathe and kind of have fresh air and air circulation than just keep them cooped up in dust bags, especially as I'm not particularly concerned about all the other elements because of all the other measures I take, which I mentioned previously. So I'm not concerned about them being damaged, and you know, given the choice, I would always rather kind of have them out in the open. The only time I use the dust bags I have, apart from when I initially buy the bag, is when I travel. I do keep all my dust bags for that reason, or if I did want to sell the bag, but I do use them for travel. So if I'm ever traveling with a bag or even a luxury pair of shoes, I will always pop them in the dust bag just for that added layer of protection. I won't always use the same one. Sometimes I use a bigger dust bag just to have a bit more padding, but that is the only time I use dust bags apart from when I initially buy the bag. Again, I do think this one comes down to personal preference as well. I know some people just prefer to store their bags in dust bags just for peace of mind, which is obviously totally fine, your bag, your choice. But I would say that it is important, if you do decide to store your bags in dust bags, to take them out periodically and let them just have fresh air and let them breathe. I know it's not a living thing, but leather can get damaged if it's cooped up, especially in humid conditions. I've just seen and heard so many horror stories about bags getting deformed. They just had too much humidity, even mold growing on bags. Like, I've genuinely seen it all. So I would say if you're gonna store a bag in a dust bag, just be careful and make sure you take it out every now and then, just to give it a bit of breather, just to have, you know, some fresh air, and just make sure that everything is okay. And then finally, I wanted to share just a few tips on general storage and kind of what I do just to make sure that my bags are stored without any issue and aren't creating any unnecessary damage to my bags. So the first tip I have is you absolutely need to be aware of chains if your bag does have a chain handle or strap, which a lot of mine do. I love chain bags, I love flat bags, they often come with chains. So I'm always very conscious about how I store chains. And again, this is amplified if you kind of store your bags in dust bags or boxes or anything like that. I'm always very, very aware of if I do travel with a bag to make sure I wrap the chain individually. And I always take a leaf out of Chanel's book here because they always store their chains very, very carefully, presumably because they know that it can maybe dent the bag. So they always make sure if you've ever bought a bag from the Chanel boutique, they always wrap the chain separately in a kind of tissue paper and then roll it down. And that's kind of what I try and do when I am traveling with my bag. So I always make sure to wrap the chain separately. It's not usually with tissue paper. I'll usually get a piece of clothing that I'm planning on traveling with anyway. Wrap the chains up and then make sure it's padded so it doesn't dent in the actual leather. And that is something that I do try and be aware of when I am just kind of generally storing my bags as well. There's not as much danger, I guess, when they're just on a shelf, because obviously in luggage, a suitcase, there are other items pressed against the bag which could potentially dent the chain and further into the leather. Not the case when they're just on a shelf, but I do still try and be mindful of the chains, that they're not kind of denting or resting against the bag in some kind of funny way that might leave a mark. The second thing which I do, and I actually get a lot of questions about this as well, I always get asked where I buy my bag stands. I don't buy my bag stands from anywhere. I literally just use random objects around my house. I have a lot of different kind of boxes and just items that can be used as stand-ins for bags. And so I figure, why not use them? So I have a lot of bags which don't stand up by themselves, and it's usually like wristlets and clutches and things like that. And when I do, I will use sometimes like a belt box. The Valentino ones happen to be great. But I've also been known to use a candle box, kind of random objects that I find. It's all I use. And obviously, you know, you can buy proper bag stands if you want, but I find it works absolutely fine and just gives that little boost to a bag which otherwise would just be lying flat. So that is it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I feel like this video was only for like the super hardcore handbag fans, but I do get so many questions on the topic that I thought I would try and answer them. If you did have a question, I hope I answered it. If I didn't, if I missed anything out, by all means leave me a comment down below and I will try and get back to you. As always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next one. Bye, guys.